Why INFJs dread leadership. The reason will shock you. The INFJ doesn't crave the spotlight, not because they doubt their strength, but because they've seen what power does to people. While others chase positions of influence, the INFJ quietly walks in the opposite direction, preferring purpose over prominence, meaning over medals. To outsiders, it's puzzling. They see an INFJ's quiet intelligence, emotional precision, and uncanny ability to unite people, and they assume leadership is their destiny. But what the world doesn't see is the silent dread that grips the INFJ at the thought of leading. They don't fear failure. They fear corruption. They fear what happens to empathy when it's forced to make ruthless decisions. And so begins their lifelong paradox, born with the traits of a leader, yet burdened with a soul that resists control. This is why INFJs dread leadership. And the reasons, as you'll soon see, will shock even those who think they know them well. 1. The weight of seeing too much. The INFJ sees the world in layers, emotion beneath expression, truth behind words, pain hidden in silence. This vision, while extraordinary, becomes a heavy burden in leadership. When an INFJ leads, they don't just see results, they feel the emotional consequences of every choice, every directive, every disappointment. While most leaders can make decisions logically and move on, the INFJ's heart holds on to the aftermath. They see the quiet hurt in someone's eyes after being corrected. They sense the resentment behind polite compliance. They feel the ripple of every emotional wound that leadership leaves behind. To the INFJ, leadership often feels like standing at the edge of a cliff, balancing between integrity and empathy, while being pulled by everyone's emotional gravity. This sensitivity, their greatest strength, becomes their greatest torment when placed in charge, because they can't switch it off. They don't just manage people, they carry them. And when you carry everyone, you eventually begin to sink. That's why the INFJ often avoids leading, not because they can't handle power, but because they can't bear the emotional cost it demands. 2. The fear of losing their humanity. Deep down, the INFJ's biggest fear isn't incompetence, it's transformation. They've watched how authority slowly erodes compassion in others, how leadership positions turn kind souls into distant strategists. They dread the day they might wake up and realize they've started making choices from the mind alone, detached from the empathy that defines them. The INFJ's intuition warns them, power changes people, and they know they are not immune. They fear that leadership might demand a version of themselves they no longer recognize, colder, harder, less human. To an INFJ, staying human is everything. It's their sacred principle, the moral compass that keeps them anchored in a world obsessed with control. So when they sense that leadership could require the sacrifice of their soul, their softness, their emotional honesty, they walk away. They'd rather stay true to themselves than become powerful and hollow. And that's something the world rarely understands. 3. The exhaustion of carrying others' shadows. INFJs are empaths, but in leadership, empathy becomes an open wound. They feel the unspoken fears of their team, absorb the anger of those they lead, and internalize every ounce of pressure projected onto them. Where others delegate problems, the INFJ involuntarily absorbs them. Each person's crisis becomes their own. Each failure feels personal. They overextend, overanalyze, and overcare. The INFJ doesn't just lead people, they unconsciously heal them. But healing drains them faster than any workload could. In time, this emotional labor becomes unbearable. They begin to retreat, not because they lack passion, but because they are dying under the weight of everyone else's emotional baggage. To lead, for them, often feels like bleeding quietly while smiling publicly. And the INFJ knows. No amount of success can justify the slow death of their emotional peace. 4. The aversion to manipulation and politics. Leadership, in most environments, is not about truth, it's about perception. It's about playing the game, networking, saying the right things, maintaining the right image. But INFJs despise facades. They crave authenticity, and leadership often demands the opposite. They can't stomach manipulation, half-truths, or power plays. They see them instantly, and it disgusts them. When an INFJ senses politics in motion, their soul recoils. They would rather leave, then engage in a system that rewards performance over integrity. In the corridors of power, where smiles hide motives and praise masks rivalry, the INFJ feels alien. They can't fake admiration, they can't flatter, and they can't play games to climb the ladder. And because of that, leadership often feels like exile, a world where their honesty becomes their weakness. So they retreat, choosing authenticity over ambition, not because they lack courage, but because they refuse to become what they hate. 5. The pain of being misunderstood by those they serve. The INFJ leads from the heart, not hierarchy. But in a world that equates compassion with weakness, their leadership style is often misread. Their silence is mistaken for passivity, their patience for indecision, their empathy for fragility. Few can see the quiet fire burning beneath the INFJ's calm. They may guide with gentleness, but they carry a powerful moral will. They can see a better future for everyone. But when others don't understand or follow, it cuts deeply. To lead and not be understood, that's a pain INFJs know too well. They pour themselves into others, only to watch those same people question their motives, misinterpret their intentions, or turn against their quiet guidance. Leadership to an INFJ often feels like standing in the middle of a storm, offering light, while being accused of hiding it. And this kind of misunderstanding leaves scars they rarely talk about. 6. The conflict between vision and compromise. The INFJ is a visionary. They see what could be, not just what is. They don't lead to maintain systems. They lead to transform them. But that's exactly where their pain begins. Leadership, especially in structured environments, demands compromise, and compromise kills the INFJ's soul. They can't tolerate mediocrity or shallow motives. They struggle to make peace with half measures when they can see the full picture of what's possible. This conflict between idealism and practicality eats them alive. Every meeting where vision gets diluted feels like betrayal. Every realistic adjustment feels like an insult to their inner truth. And soon, leadership becomes suffocating, because the INFJ doesn't just want to lead, they want to elevate consciousness. When they realize most people aren't ready for that, they withdraw, not because they can't lead, but because the world doesn't want to be led where their soul intends to go. 7. The burden of moral responsibility. For most people, leadership is a position. For the INFJ, it's a calling with moral weight. They don't see leadership as privilege. They see it as responsibility for souls. Every decision carries moral implications. Every misstep feels like a betrayal of trust. The INFJ doesn't just think, what's best for the team? They think, will this choice harm someone's spirit? And that depth of conscience, while beautiful, becomes suffocating. They can't detach, can't delegate morality, can't separate the person from the decision. So they live in a constant moral tension, wanting to do good, while realizing leadership sometimes demands choices that hurt. And that is agony for an INFJ. They would rather carry their integrity in solitude than risk losing it in leadership. To them, moral purity isn't optional, it's survival. 8. The secret reason. They were never meant to lead in the conventional way. Here lies the shocking truth. INFJs don't dread leadership because they're weak. They dread it because they were never designed for the world's definition of leadership. The world glorifies leaders who command, who dominate, who inspire fear. But INFJs lead through quiet influence, through transformation that begins in the heart. Their leadership isn't loud, it's luminous. It happens in conversations, in empathy, in the way they make one person believe in themselves again. They don't lead crowds, they awaken souls. And that's the reason they dread traditional leadership, because it feels too small for their spirit, too performative, too impersonal, too disconnected from the sacred human truth they live for. INFJs were never meant to lead systems. They were meant to lead hearts. Their power lies not in position, but in presence, not in control, but in connection. And once they realize this, the dread dissolves, because true leadership, the kind born of authenticity, empathy, and soul, was never something they had to chase. It was already who they are. In a world obsessed with control, the INFJ walks a different path. They may never stand on a stage, wear a title, or hold a crown, but their influence echoes in the hearts they've touched. They lead not through authority, but through the quiet courage to remain human. They dread leadership not because they fear it, but because they understand its shadow too well. And that understanding, that refusal to let power corrupt love, is the highest form of leadership there is. So when the world wonders why the INFJ stays behind, the truth is simple. They never stepped back out of fear. They stepped back to protect the light that makes them who they are.